So today I'm going to talk about Digital Markets Act and its implications for the mobile gaming industry. But before I jump into that, some self-introduction first. My personal background is I was born in a beautiful country called Vietnam. I was born there but raised in Poland. But I've been living in Poland for more than 30 years. First time coming here in '91. Of course, with Vietnam is a great, besides the touristic, side, it's also a great country to make games as well. So I've traveled a pretty long distance from there, and I have a data engineering, data science background. I've been doing and helping larger brands to build their big data commerce strategies, as well as I have also set up my own companies, raise financing, mostly in commerce and software. So commerce, e-commerce is something very dear to my heart, let's say. And so I feel like the game industry still have, in terms of e-commerce and commerce, still have a long way. You guys know how to make games. You guys know how to acquire users through mobile gaming, mobile channels. But I feel like there's still a long way to go in terms of commerce. So we have built something for the game industry as a whole, for Steam PC games as well as for mobile games, to help them sell their in-game app purchases, IAP, or Steam PC games for self-distribution on their own web stores. So as you know, the state of mobile gaming is pretty complicated right now, with a lot of layoffs and downsizing. In recent years, receiving even more and more games being published on Google Play and App Store. And it is now coming back to a point where it is, in terms of app installs and also user growth, we're seeing some rebounds for the last year. Of course, the peak was during the COVID times, but now I think it is a pretty good, let's say, prospect in the future in terms of user growth. Still, there are a lot of challenges in the mobile game industry, as you know. Post IDFA, a very little amount of users actually opting into be tracked by you guys, by apps, by games in their vast network, and also the SCAD network has its limitations if we're talking about correct conversion measurement and attribution, and it is also pretty, let's say, hard to set that up. The IAP, IA revenues are falling, and the downloads along the with average consumer spend is also tanking. With the also convergence with AI-generated game assets, we will see even more competition among game developers and games in general, being able to fasten your speed development process with, of course, 3D assets generation with your NPC. Everyone's talking about AI NPCs, but we are yet to see any, let's say, compelling use cases in this. But I'm actually a big believer in shortening the time of game development process using AI, especially in terms of scenario building and also asset generation. And so what we're seeing now on the market, as we see, is there's a growing number of games released each year, and there's also growing competition among the game developers, but time to market is also shortening. And with the legal framework for their self-distribution, such as Digital Markets Act, allowing game developers to, one, monetize their user base outside the app stores, and two, allowing alternative payment methods inside games or apps, we will see a diversified distribution among the top, let's say, priorities among game developers to set them apart from the competition. So distribution is outside of the app stores. This is something that we have seen in the last 2 years. At least the big players have been doing that a lot. Playtika, Rovio, and Supercell, they have been all experimenting with web stores. And that is their unique approach to, first of all, distribute their in-game content to users, selling directly to the players without the intermediary such as marketplaces. And two, that is their boost to profitability, because when you distribute your games or your in-game assets outside of the marketplaces, app stores, it means that you don't have to pay the 30% commission to the big players. And so why self-distribution matters? One is the distribution edge over your competitors. When everyone is pumping their budget in terms of user acquisition among the mobile gaming space, everyone has kind of like the same playbook in terms of UA, then you have to differentiate yourself. And one of the ways is actually to look at the web channel, where you can actually have cookies from the users, you can track them, you can retarget them, you can remarket them among the largest ad networks out there, the Google Display Network, YouTube, TikTok. All those platforms work on the web as well, and so you are not limited to IDFA or any let's say privacy issues, concerns among inside the app stores. And so if Google and Apple are all benefiting the most from your hard-earned top spending players, then you should be looking at other ways to monetize your user base. And so that's why one of the, let's say, boosters of such diversification of distribution is the Digital Markets Act that has been introduced in March this year. So this is super fresh. Not everyone knows about this, and not everyone knows what is the playbook with the new legal framework in Europe, in the European Economic Area, EEA. And even more so in the Americas, North America and South America. And so in part of the Digital Markets Act, you can of course download it from the web, from the European Commission website, but I will talk through the most important points of the Digital Markets Act. So the DMA is specifically designed to keep the gatekeepers from having too much monopoly in the app marketplaces. And so they have designated the gatekeepers, who are companies with enough reach, over 45 million users per month and 10,000 business users per year, or if they have the turnover or market value exceeding $7.5 billion or $75 billion respectively. And the European Commission requires them to do certain things with that legal framework that has been introduced March this year. And so those gatekeepers are, of course, companies such as Facebook, Google, Amazon, Meta, and the DMA has been in work for a very long time. So only this March this year, it was the deadline to comply for all those companies. But before that, Apple was fined, Google was fined $600 million. Apple was fined even more than that. So it has been all boiling up in the recent years, even with the Epic Games versus Apple legal suit. It all ended up being a written paper that was put out there by the European Commission. So the notification and designation of the gatekeepers was set up in September 2023, and that was the opening also of market investigations into the gatekeeping practices of all those monopolies, or Apple and Google, favoring your own search results in the search results, keeping game app developers from accessing alternative payment methods or distribution. All those practices now has been lifted up, at least in Europe, for game developers to be more free in terms of how you distribute games or your in-game app purchases. So there's a long list of affected services from the DMA that pertains online search engines, online marketplaces, but specifically today we're going to talk about how it affects the mobile gaming industry. So the benefits of the DMA is fourfold. One is the reduced control over the marketplace from Apple and from Google. So there's going to be new opportunities for you to, for example, implement alternative payment method inside your app or your game with some consequences in terms of commission. But it also it gives a fairer app review process. It allows you to get more information about why your app was, for example, rejected by Apple. There's more stress in interoperability among the apps and games, and also data portability. So offering different features that enable users to transfer from one app to another and from one ecosystem to another. That may lead to Apple and Google marketplaces, app stores to be more interoperable. And you will certainly see that in the future with the introduction with, for example, Microsoft Mobile Game Store, which could come later this year, and also the Epic Games Mobile Game Store also later this year. So we're going to see 4 major players having the marketplaces on users' phones. So it's not going to be the duopolies of Apple and Google anymore. It will allow other developers to introduce their own app marketplaces inside Google and Apple. So that means for you as game developers, it's going to be more challenging, more costly, certainly, to distribute in different marketplaces. But with DMA, it also means that it could be, that they will also be enforced with, open portability. There's a long list of also other benefits from the DMA, the protection of personal data. It will be harder for Apple and Google to harvest that data to show ads in other networks. Protection against unfair practices like search results, favorism. You will be able to freely promote also your other games, other apps, and also other ways of monetization among your apps. And so in terms of how specifically all those giants have implemented those measures, specifically for the game industry, Apple has new guidelines, has new SDKs for you. As an example, you can now offer different payment methods alongside Google Play inside your app or your game. But of course, with consequences that, for example, if you have an alternative payment method, sure, you are not paying the full 30% commission for Google, but that would be 27%. And there are certain thresholds and different categories of apps or games that have different commissions. For example, for developers that enroll in the 15% free feed tier that has less than $1 million of revenue for each year, they can have 15% of commission, and that grows to 30% if they exceed that number. You can also have different payment methods alongside Google Play, not just one, but you can offer how many you would want, and they all come with SDKs, appropriate SDKs, as well as user interface and user experience guidelines by Google, how to implement those alternative payment methods. And alongside that, Google has also introduced consent mode version 2, which is, let's say, even more protective of the user's data. So up until now, for apps, the instance ID can be collected for analytics purposes. The app storage means that the device ID can be also collected for advertising purposes. And now there's going to be controls whether user data can be spent for Google for advertising purposes, and also ad personalization. So what it means for example, Google, game advertisers is that one, you have to use a certified Google consent management platform, update your CMP, and make sure your MMP is up to date to receive the new tags from CMP. And not complying that will impact your ability to measure the performance of your campaigns. And what about Google? So Google and Apple has been forced to allow advertise and sell services to users acquired through the gatekeeper services. So you can advertise your other games within your existing game. You can also allow your users to access the services that have been bought in places other than the App Store. So it means that, for example, let's say that the Epic Game Store is going to be there, the Microsoft Game Store is going to be there. If they purchase something on the Epic Game Store, let's say an IAP, they have to also be able to use that item inside the game from the App Store. The users will also be allowed to install and use third-party software. And it is especially important to allow more competition among the app marketplaces. That's why now Microsoft and Epic Games, they are able to launch their own marketplaces just because the Article 6.4 from DMA allows that, enforces Apple to do that. So it means that in the future we may also see Steam Marketplace on the App Store, for example. And one of the most important consequences of the DMA is that you can sell your IAP and redirect your users to your web store. Within the game, you can advertise through notifications, through messages, through banners, through other notifications, that there's something that the transaction can be finalized through web stores or third-party services where the user will be redirected and can finalize the transaction elsewhere. And that would mean that you don't actually have to pay the 30% commission from Apple or even the new commission guideline that has been introduced with the DMA. Not everyone is happy about how Apple handled the introduction of DMA among the apps marketplace. And I think that, in my personal opinion, that will also take some time before Apple will lower much more the commission that they're taking for in-game app purchases or for subscription paid payments inside the apps. We have made a matrix where you can understand more clearly which is your, let's say, tier in terms of like current DMA setup in the Apple guidelines. If you are a small business, if you enroll into the program for small businesses with less than $1 million of annual revenue, then you fall into the small business. And with you being able to sell digital goods, the current plan will entail 10% plus 3% using Apple's payment service, plus 50 cents per install over $1 million app installs. The 50 cents per install over $1 million does not, so repeat installs count as one install. So at least there's no, let's say, double counting towards your bill to Apple. So in effect, that's 13% plus 50 cents. And that is when you are a small business and you enroll into the new plan under DMA for Apple. For larger businesses, that's 17% plus 3%, plus 50 cents per install over $1 million. So as you can see, that is not much of the change, let's say, and Apple will try to keep those percentages high enough for you to reconsider, let's say, your alternative payment methods. So if you look at apps with at least 1 million app installs by vertical, then of course generative AI, shopping have a large, let's say, share of apps with more than 1 million app installs. Gaming overall, that is more than 4%. So Apple's explanation for the new fee is that it will affect only 4% of the total mobile gaming market. 96% will stay, will have, let's say, less commission for the in-game in-app purchases for the new plans. So if you want to try it out. So if your game has certain number of downloads, you can try out these two calculators. You can see for yourself where you start paying more, where you start paying less. Does it, is it worth it to switch to a new plan or not? And so one of the consequences of opening the app marketplaces and the ecosystem for other players is that Microsoft, Epic Game Store, as I mentioned before, they are introducing their own game stores at the end of this year. So when you self-distribute, meaning that you have your own distribution channel, you actually own the data. So one of the advantages of having also your own distribution channel, such as web store, is that you can actually see all the users' behaviors on your web store, for example. I take this Supercell store as an example, Star Trek fleet from Scopely, and all the big players on the mobile gaming space has been essentially not only experimenting but thriving in the web store or alternative distribution market, with Playtika reporting over 25% of their revenue. That's hundreds of millions of dollars per year distribution via the web store. So direct to consumer is a strategy that has, let's say, long been implemented among the largest players. And as an example, you can see the Supercell store, where you can buy Brawl Stars, you can buy Clash of Clans items on that web store, being 10%, 20%, even in some cases 25% cheaper than the in-game purchases. They are not actively, at least in how it is in practice, they are not actively promoting that among the Apple version of the game. But for Android, it's much easier. At least for Rovio, for example, you can see notifications, you can see messages, banners, promoting the web store, where you can actually buy those in-game app purchases up to 30% cheaper than in-game store. And this is not the only examples out there. From Poland, for example, 10 Square Games has their own web store, where you can buy their in-game app purchases through the web store. And also Huuuge Games has seeing some major success in terms of the web shop revenue and also direct-to-consumer approaches. If you read through the Playtika's financial report for that year, the direct-to-consumer, as I mentioned, is already more than 25% of their revenue. So, in short, the mobile game industry is where $22 billion is coming from the top players. So having your own diversified distribution channel really works on your bottom line. Not so much the top line revenue, but the web stores and also alternative distribution will affect your profitability. And it will also unlock new ways of user acquisition on the web. So we have built some out of the box, let's say, a solution. So you can build that web store using our solution. And the commission is really low. It's just 5% and 50 cents per transaction. How does it work in practice? The players, they get communicated. If not in the game, they can get communicated through social channels, through influencers. That is the acquisition channel for your existing players. You don't actually spend more on user acquisition because you redirect those users in the game to the web store. So essentially making more money from your existing player base, not growing, the marketing budget for acquiring new users. So that is, milking as much as possible from your existing users. So as you can see here, once you, as a best practice, let's say, once you buy from the web store, you can come back to the game and you get an instant notification that the item was purchased, and that's it. And the player can start using that item and continue playing. Now having spent 10% to 25% less than the in-game store. I'm going to talk about a few best practices that we see on the market, and as well as from our own experience. One is it is best if you have a portfolio of games, it is best to use one single web store or marketplace for all your games, because every time that a user purchases something from the web store, they leave the email on the web store. So you can essentially cross-sell or upsell among your games and redirect users from different games to one to another. And two is you will need a really intuitive and simple builder to not take away the precious time from your developers to build the web store. And it also needs a native payment processing integration with customized branding. And one of the best ways, as I mentioned, to monetize that web store is actually to redirect the users from your existing user base to the web store from inside the game. And the way it can work is really simple. The web store can just send a webhook information or from your API to check the user ID if it exists or not, send that information to the game's backend. The game's backend will recognize if that transaction have gone through and if the user ID actually exists in the game or not, and then rewarding that item or that currency to that user. So integration and time to market is also really important. The simpler, let's say, the better. The best solutions out there are the ones who will have definitely just a couple of calls to your game's backend and verifying that transaction and verifying if that user ID or that server ID is correct or not. Another best practice is to actually promote in the game. You have to, if you are to utilize the best from the web store, is one, redirect the users in the game, tell them about promotions, tell them about the discounts that they get through the web store. And typically, we have seen 60% conversion rate from mobile game to the web. So it means that if you do it correctly from your social media channels, from your games, you can actually drive 60% of players coming to the web store. They will end up finalizing a transaction through the web store. So thus, saving you the 3% commission or any commission from the app marketplaces. It is also important to localize the web store. Depending on the user's IP, you have to actually offer them different currencies or payment methods that are localized for their let's say payment usual needs. So of course for the Polish market, that's Blik or Przeleway 24. For Germany, that could be so forth. And so the next thing would be, actually having payment methods or the payment processing provider or payment orchestrator to allow the local payment methods for best converting web store. And two is to actually handle the tax calculation, the international tax calculation. So it is important for certain user IPs to calculate correct taxes, because you, in the end, will be, be responsible for filing those and reporting those taxes. In our case, in our solution, we are the merchant of record, so we take care of tax reporting and also calculation as well. But bear in mind that the payment integration also should be natively integrated within the web store, or you can also integrate it for yourself. In terms of how some of the partner providers out there provide the payment methods, they can act as, let's say, a master merchant, where they can distribute all the users' payments to the merchant account of your game, your developer, and then you can pay out those proceedings to your own bank account. minus, of course, all the taxes, all the commissions along the way. So this is something that we have also built. This is the web store that has been used by being our solution. So we can have a lot of payment methods, including credit cards, Google Pay, WeChat Pay, and other payments methods as well. And at the end, you won't have to involve as much from your development team, because everything is drag and drop and no code solution. So yeah, that is everything from my side, and I hope that you can get to know more about the DMA using our solution. And also I encourage you to ask any questions about the DMA and also the web store solution on the market. Thank you.